Interesting. It was very, it was always interesting. There was always something going on. I was very lucky in that regard because they were storytellers themselves. So it was being immersed in all forms of storytelling.
You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanders,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is Rhett Bruno, Jaime Castle, and Luke Daniels. Thanks for tuning in to the Author Stories Podcast today. You can find links to all of the shows at hankgarner.com. There's a handy sidebar with links where you can subscribe to the show any way that you like to listen to podcasts. There's a link there. It's hankgarner.com. There's more than 500 shows. Dig in and find something that you would enjoy. I'd like to tell you about some sponsors today before we get started. Author Mary Buckham has a 3-book set. She's a USA Today bestseller, The Invisible Recruits, The Beginning, a 3-book set. Kindle edition is on sale now for $2.99. That's 3 books for $2.99. Join new IR agents Alec Nozick and Kelly McAllister as they struggle to master their newfound preternatural abilities while being thrown into a dark world of danger and intrigue. Being an invisible recruit means learn hard lessons fast or die trying. Hidden from a world unaware of magic, Alex and Kelly are members of a group of operatives known as the Invisible Recruits, the only ones willing to stand between mankind and those powerful preternatural factions, seeking to change the balance of power and gain world domination. While battling for their lives, Alex and Kelly both must deal with dangerous creatures, mysterious pasts, shape-shifting brothers, and more. What could possibly go wrong? Begin with the novella that started it all, Invisible Prison, to discover how Alex Nozick first met the IR team. Then join Alex on her initial solo mission in Invisible Magic. Next, it's time to join teammate Kelly McAllister in a race to uncover secrets and stop evil growing in the heart of Africa. Mary writes stories full of grit and determination with plenty of action, but always with a sense of hope and a good dollop of romance. Get the 3-book set for only $2.99, Invisible Recruits, The Beginning, a 3-book set for Kindle. Also, I'd like to thank George Kramer. His new book, To Some It's Just a Rose, is out now. Nancy Hemingway is a beautiful, wealthy heiress that has a penchant for attracting weirdos. When roses start mysteriously appearing at her doorstep, at work, and everywhere she turns, her friends begin disappearing. Nancy enlists her eccentric cousin Etna to help her figure out what's going on, only to discover that Etna isn't who she thought she was. Nothing is as it appears to be, and someone is targeting Nancy. Can she outsmart this lunatic and find her friends before it's too late? The new psychological thriller from George Kramer, To Some It's Just a Rose. Thank you to J.R. Hanley and Chris Winder. Their new book, Breach Team, is out now. Survival means fighting through the unknown. Corporal John Harden is a decorated soldier living in the shadow of his father, a celebrated war hero. Determined to make his own way in the galaxy, John develops a reputation as a brawler, serving aboard the USS Hughes. A rescue beacon brings John and his fellow Legionnaires to a cargo ship thought lost 2 decades ago, and the heavily damaged alien vessel of an unknown species that took it down. With the brass demanding details and apparent survivors begging for aid, John's team boards the derelict ships, vowing to leave no man behind. On board, nightmares become reality as John and his team are separated and left behind, presumed to be killed in action. Assaulted on all sides by mysterious alien tech, John gets the chance to finally prove himself worth being his father's son, if he can survive the onslaught. The way home is inside, and John won't back down from the fight, though a determined enemy will make him pay for every inch. Breach Team is a non-stop action thrill ride with fast-paced warfare written by 2 veterans. Join the fight by getting your copy today. Breach Team by J.R. Hanley and Chris Winder. Thanks for listening. Now on to our interview. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. We've got a special roundtable discussion tonight with Rhett Bruno, Jaime Castle, and the one and only Luke Daniels, narrator extraordinaire. We're talking about Web of Eyes, the new audiobook, and actually, when we're recording this, Winds of War, the sequel to that, books 1 and 2 of the Buried Goddess Saga are out now, and Rhett and Jaime co-wrote this, and Luke narrated, and we're going to talk all about it tonight. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We're going to start right off. Rhett and Jaime, the Buried Goddess Saga. I've talked with Jaime before about kind of how this series got its initial start. Rhett, when did you come into the series, and how did you guys decide to collaborate on it?
So me and Jaime actually had been working together on some marketing stuff early on, and I had a manuscript I had started, but it was sort of something new for me. I don't usually write in our present world, and I thought that Jamie's sense of humor would add to it. So we co-wrote on that manuscript, which actually is just sitting in a folder right now. It's still unpublished and being shopped around. But after that, we kind of decided to start collaborating on a fantasy series that sort of had started in Jamie's head, and then we took it and took those characters he thought of and really kind of built this whole world and this series of characters together. And yeah, that's basically where it started. I mean, we sort of approached it as a team, and we basically have split the work ever since.
Nice. How does that work on a practical level? Do you guys take a section of the book and then trade those, or does Jaime begin with kind of a kernel and you flesh it out, or the other way around? Kind of what's that collaboration look like for you two?
I mean, I don't know if we're every other. Because fantasy allows you to have different points of view. We sort of both take a character, and book one has 2 points of view, and there's more and more in each book as we're writing them. So we each kind of take a point of view, run with it a little bit, and then swap back and forth and kind of add into it and developmentally edit each other. And that's sort of our strategy until the chapters where the characters meet up, and then we basically write it together. One person might write a few pages and we'll talk about it all, and the other person then might push it forward. But we have a very collaborative process. I mean, Jaime will say we basically talk to each other more than we talk to our wives because we're always plotting stuff together. So that's how we do it, and it makes it easier having multiple characters to both really sort of embrace one of them and push them forward together.
Jaime, speaking of the multiple characters, when you're writing a series that keeps growing and expanding, and you've got these multiple viewpoints, but more than the multiple viewpoints, you're kind of collecting a band of characters through the series, and the world keeps getting wider, and the people we follow keeps getting wider. When you're developing new characters and new points of view, is it something you think about from the beginning, or do those expand as the story grows and expands as you write?
Well, I can answer specifically from the Web of Eyes manuscript. Sora, who became a major part of the series, wasn't even a blip on the radar. She didn't even exist until we were probably 50,000 words into the manuscript, and she showed up. And then at that point, Hank, you and I talked about pantsing and writing into the dark together on a previous episode. And I mentioned how I kind of do post outlining. Well, Sora was kind of a post outline moment for me, where I wrote her in almost just pantsing. I was pantsing, and I'm like, oh, this chick that he knew from way back when is now there. And so Rhett and I had to go back through the manuscript and add in hints of her throughout the whole thing. And now she's become a major player in it. So I don't even remember what your question was, but I hope that answered it.
Yeah,
I mean that's an answer, so that's
okay,
good.
cool.
That's good
I
enough. Yeah, that's good enough.
That same story from my perspective is just one day Jaime was writing a chapter, and he's like, "So I just made him run into his friend who is a blood mage, and that's what's going to happen. And I was kind of like, all right, let's see where this goes. And he became basically one of our favorite character.
Mm-hmm.
And there were hints of him having like friends all throughout the book, so it was such a natural progression. And then because of editing, it sort of changed the whole trajectory of where that book was going, and even the series, which is a common theme you'll find in these books, is we try to keep our outline loose and surprise each other while still staying true to the characters. And I think that's where us collaborating has really shined, is even reviewers telling us like they couldn't predict what was going to happen. And that's kind of where we wanted this to be. We just got an overarching idea for the story, and we've let the story unfold within that structure with our characters. So that's where collaborating, I think, has helped us a lot.
I thought that was my question, but okay, yeah, go for it, Rhett. You got it. Cool.
I love being back in middle school. Guys, there are some books that when you read it, you think to yourself, this book needs to be performed. This is, there's a dry reading experience, and then there's someone who can actually take a book and make it come alive. And the recent boom in audiobooks, and audiobooks are not new by any stretch of the imagination, but I think we can all agree that there's been kind of exponential growth over the last few years in the audiobook market. And there are certain narrators who just bring a book to life. When you guys are writing this, are you writing like you want to hear this book performed? And there are a lot of us like to kind of read back dialogue and kind of do voices for ourselves to just see how it sounds to the ear and not just in your mind. Are you writing for audio?
Well, I said it from the start. I literally wrote everything that I wrote in this book. Which, again, we touch every single word. He and I, Rhett and I, both touched every word. Even as I went through kind of writing into Rhett's characters, I wrote every single word of this book with Luke Daniels in mind, not even thinking that Luke was an option. I remember texting him one day before we had to deal with Audible Studios, and I asked him questions about how he produces things and his best, because in my mind, Luke was.
Wow, I appreciate it. Appreciate it.
What about you, Rhett? Do you think audio when you're writing, or do you think performance when you're writing?
Not really. I tend to read out loud to myself while I'm writing anyway. I just always have done that, especially when I'm going back through and editing. And between the two of us, Jaime is the huge audiobook listener. I tend to struggle listening through entire books on audio, so he's the one who kind of went through and made sure that this was perfect working for audio after we have finished writing the whole thing. But yeah, from day one, he had Luke in mind, and so I let him kind of be in charge of choosing who our narrator would be, because I knew how much he wanted him.
And do you regret that decision now? Let's just
I don't.
Let's just get to the real nitty gritty here.
Yeah. Well, I remember Jaime and I having a conversation probably, I don't know, maybe a year ago, where we talked about the Iron Druid series. And I forget how it started, but somewhere in there, Jaime told me, well, I don't care. Luke Daniels did it. I'll listen to anything that he does. And I said, okay, well, I'll get it. And I jumped into book one, and then we had Kevin on the show like 3 weeks later because I had to talk to him.
He's great.
After that. Oh, he's fantastic.
He's such a good guy.
Yeah. Well, I think you and I were both done with Butcher, right? We both finished Dresden.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were like, where do I go next? And I think the obvious progression from Dresden is, if you're looking for something like it, of course, would be to go to Iron Druid.
Right. Yeah.
Vice versa as well.
Yeah. So, Luke, I know you come from a family of actors. What was it like growing up in a family of actors?
Interesting. It was very. It was always interesting. There was always something going on. I was very lucky in that regard because they were storytellers themselves. So it was being immersed in all forms of storytelling, because they did both theater, and then they also taught and did a lot of actor training and coaching, and so we were always involved with that kind of stuff and going to different new theaters, and they would travel in summers when they weren't teaching, and we'd go to Massachusetts, where there's Shakespeare and Company, which is a famous regional playhouse in America, and so meeting lots of people. So I think it kind of developed an idea of storytelling as an art form, but also as a craft that can be pursued and lived. And then also being exposed to a lot of different people created kind of a rich story of just like reality too. So seeing lots of different shows and being exposed to that, I got to see that. And I think it just kind of created a natural desire in me to keep doing that even after I got older. I did do one semester of business college, but let's just say when I woke up drunk in class one day, I was like, this probably is not the best. I'm probably not really reaching my full potential here. So that lasted about 2 months.
I made it through one day of a business class lecture. So.
I'm impressed I actually was at class. I mean, I made it to class, but I shouldn't have been. I definitely shouldn't have been.
Oh, man. Luke, are you a writer yourself?
Yeah, a little bit. And I'm kind of trying to move towards that a little bit too. After you read so many books, you start to say, I can do this. These guys are hacks, except for Present Company excluded. No, that's not true. That's not true. But it is, it's kind of like a crash course in writing by reading so many different people's work. So I do feel like I want to try my hand at it. I definitely enjoy the craft of that. And it is kind of like, I feel like it's storytelling in its purest form because you have no other, visuals or collaborators or that. I think that's why it's interesting with Rhett and Jaime that they can collaborate that way. I think that's cool because you get a different feel for the book because it's a little more expansive, especially with something with fantasy where we have such a big world. I think that helps kind of develop it and make it a little bigger, more fun to read or listen to.
I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. Like, if you want to co-author, hi, I'm Jaime Castle, and I would love to write with Luke Daniels.
I appreciate that, Jaime. Well, hey, Rhett, would you like to
I mean, you probably just picked the better of the two, so that's good. I get it.
No, I've got a couple things I'm working on for 2019, but I can't talk about them yet, but I'm excited for it.
Ooh, super secret projects. Those are the best.
Yeah. Even if they're not secret, you just say that they're secret and then they feel better.
Well, Luke, I know that you've narrated just across the entire spectrum. But I think there are certain genre fans that just kind of obsess over your work. And I think science fiction and fantasy fans are probably the largest of that group. Are you a science fiction fantasy fan?
Yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah. I grew up listening to old radio podcast, like radio shows from long time ago, and watching Mystery Science Theater and reading comic books. And I'm as nerd as they come. So we're all brethren here. So I am very fortunate to get to read. I say that I haven't read a book that I chose in 10 years, but I'm lucky that I like the books that I do read. So even though I'm not, picking them, it's, it's not pleasure reading, but it's stuff that I would be interested in anyways. And I do like science fiction and fantasy, and there's been such a boon in it lately, and it really lends itself well to audio. So I think that's why you see a lot of people that get hooked into it, because you've got that kind of movie of the mind feel that I think people like getting an experience that way, where there's different characters and especially with the fantasy magic and things like that, their minds can really take it in and go with it. So, and audio really serves it well.
Well, do you approach a book differently if it's science fiction or fantasy, a fantasy book that's a completely new world, or a science fiction book that's our world removed, by space and time, as opposed to a book like Rhett said earlier is in our present, time and place. Do you approach those differently if it's something, a story that's unfolding in 2018 as opposed to, a space opera of 1,000 years in the future?
Well, they're all just words on a page, so you don't really. No, I think I wouldn't say I approach it differently, but I do think I would perform it differently. So I would still approach it just as a story that needs to be told and how to tell the story. Same kind of basic mechanics that go into any performance, but the actual performance will be dictated by the genre. So if it's a kitchen sink drama that's, very kind of subtle and first person point of view and stuff, the characterizations are going to be less broad. And if it's going to be a big fantasy world where you're trying to create that kind of scope and have different dialects and that, you're going to have to go bigger places to try to fill out that space. So in that way, yeah, it is different. And if it's a sci-fi, I don't know how many computer generated voices I've had to do, but my goal is in each one, I want to do it a little bit better or a little different, so it doesn't get stale for my own sake, but also for people that listen, because I know a lot of people do listen. Once you find a voice that you like, you tend to listen to their work. And so I don't want to bore people, you know what I mean? Where they're like, oh, that's his computer generated voice. So you're trying to find something that's unique to that telling, that story. So if it's an AI for military science fiction, what qualities did the writers put into that AI? Is it kind of snarky? Okay, so the AI can still sound somewhat automated, but have a snark to it. Or is the AI really erudite and kind of know-it-all? Or is the AI kind of lowbrow? Then you give it a little coloring based on that. But it has to kind of work with the text.
Gotcha.
Can I interject for 1 second, Luke? I didn't even let you answer if I could, Luke. One of the things that I actually really enjoy, just as a Luke Daniels fan, I actually really love finding the voices from various series in other series. I remember in Kill the Farm Boy, I think. It was the Giants. What was Hearn's Giant?
Plague of Giants. Plague of
Giants. Yeah. You had a priest, and I think I even texted you about this. You had a priest that came to a table and was talking, and it was Philip.
Oh yeah,
from Magic 2.0.
I even told Kevin. I was like, I hope you don't mind, but I'm putting a very popular character as a minor character in your book.
And you did in Web of Eyes, or maybe it was Winds of War. You did. Now this isn't your character, but you did. You picked up on the Gollum reference when he talks about the precious ring.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Dude, I was laying in bed listening to that, and joy came over my spirit. Because I didn't know if you had it. And it was awesome. Fantastic.
It's all that subtext you got laying in there, picking up on. You got to read between the lines sometimes.
Do you pre-read your books? Do you pre-read before you narrate?
No.
Wow. Awesome.
I did for the first this is a whole funny little controversy in the audio community, because if I say that, then it's really
the cold
bad.
Read.
It's really bad. Yeah. But I spent 3-4 years meticulously. This was before iPads, so using paper. My whole trunk was filled with reams, thousands of pages of manuscripts that I would go through, and I would highlight each character, and I would come up with a list. And I did that, and it was worth it. I feel like that is why I did as well as I did. But after a while, it's just, you can't keep that up. It's just not possible. I would literally spend every day recording and then every night reading, and it's just I can't do it. So I have ways, I hire people that you can hire people that are called preppers. It's a really dirty title, but they're wonderful people. And they help you out with reading it ahead of time and giving you lists. I have wonderful authors like Rhett and Jaime who can give me some help ahead of time to give me any heads up of things they might want to hear or things they might not want to hear. And especially with made-up worlds, it's always important to get the author's input, if they want to, of what the made-up words are or their kind of sound that they want to hear. And I think sometimes authors don't think about it because they're writing it, you know what I mean? And sometimes they do. Like Rhett said, he reads it out loud, so you're really aware of that. But I think that collaboration in that respect helps out. And then a lot of it is I work from home, so I can move slowly. So before, when I was prepping like that, I was working in a studio system where there was you go in and you work and you crank it out, right? So now at home, I may record and then I may get to a part that I don't know. what's going to happen. So I take a break and I'll go look ahead. And then I'll come back in and record. So it's a much more loose process when I do it at home, as opposed to those years doing it in the studio where you show up at 8:30 and there's an engineer and a director, and they're not going to wait for you to go ahead. And so, you know what I mean? I can kind of build the prep time into the actual record as opposed to doing it all ahead of time. And that still gives me the feeling of being spontaneous, which is what I like. I like to not know what's going to happen because I feel like that is what engages me. I don't want to fuck up, but I do like to be like the reader going along and going, holy shit, this is happening, you know?
Right. Well, the other side of spontaneity, though, is sometimes it can be a train wreck on the other side. Do you ever get into a read and go, no, that's the wrong character. That's not what this character
Sure.
would do.
Yeah. All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I will say, you know, I'm blessed with pretty good instincts in that a lot of times kind of what it's like a happy accident. What I'm kind of feeling is what the author's putting across. And then I find out like this actually serves the character really well. But there's always times where I go, I'm really going too far with this guy. I need to pull back. Or this guy needs to be less whatever. Or, you know what, I'd actually like him to sound a little different. And I go back and fix it. I do that constantly. Yeah.
Well, you know, we were talking earlier about this large cast of characters and these band of participants, especially in fantasy literature. We start getting lots of points of view, lots of characters. When you're performing that, are there any tricks that you've learned to kind of remember what you've done for a character earlier? And, you know, I'm thinking of a book kind of like something George R.R. Martin might do, where you've got a character that you spend a good bit of time with, and then it may be 300 pages before you see that character again. Are there some things that you do to kind of remember certain inflections or certain character traits that you've given a character?
Well, I think there's two answers to that. One is that, sorry, my mother's texting me. She's asking about Christmas presents for my daughter.
Hi, Mom.
She doesn't have any time. No, she's sweet. Okay, so yeah, there's two answers. I think that what are we talking about? Characters?
Yeah, just, you know,
sorry,
keeping up with the characters you've created.
Yeah. So what's great is the two answers is like I've got searchable with digital stuff. Everything's searchable. So if I was doing a book and a character shows up 300 pages later, I say Henry and I type it into the script, and then it shows me, on page 8, Henry appeared. I go back and I read Henry, and then I have a timestamp that I can go into my recording and listen to Henry and go, oh, that's what I chose to do 2 days ago when I did Henry. Does that make sense? And then the other option is like actually if there's like a long running series, and also there's a certain physicality to each of the voices. So I think those are kind of what I think of as like hangers. And then you kind of drape the character over that. So whether the physicality is something as simple as just slightly raised tongue, or a wider open mouth, or a more erect posture, or a more guttural sound, those are like the beginning. That's like the little coat hanger. And then if I can click to that the rest falls on top of it.
You and Kevin Hearn did this great video together where you guys met at the pub and were talking about the process. And you kind of go through the process of coming up with a character, kind of distilling down the essence of the character. And like, what does that look like in real time? I mean, are you working through that in the studio?
Yeah, sometimes I am. I mean, yeah, for a lot of times it's, so for instance, Whitney, for one of the main characters in
fan favorite.
Yeah. Fan favorite, but also annoying. So I had to balance, and he has a character arc, which thankfully the writers, hopefully they're not listening to this, put into it, but so he does start out so brash, and I got onto that right away, that he's not going to be able to stay on this high very long. So that kind of idea in my head of somebody who's a storyteller, but also a con man, but also like has a heart, but everything around it to me just spoke an Irish dialect. I don't know why, but it just had that melody to it, but also kind of shifty. Like a leprechaun you want to know, but you also don't want to know, because they'll lead you to the gold, but they'll cut off feet and take the gold. Like it's a dangerous thing. So I like that duality of having really musical sounding words, but you don't really know whether to trust it. So I knew that from the beginning. And then as the book progresses, he changes a little bit and he goes through enough stuff that he still has the same voice, but it's not as ebullient. It's not as showy, I feel like, by the end of the trilogy, at least, or these three, that he's kind of been brought his come up. And so you still have that character. So there's a natural progression there. And then as far as like a character goes, like, it may take like a chapter or two before I feel comfortable. And if I feel like it's waffling in the beginning, I'll go back and record it. But generally by the first couple chapters, I'll have that down and then I don't have to worry about it. You know what I mean? Finding that actual center of the character.
Well, it's a rare occasion where we get to talk to the authors and the narrator of their series at the same time. So, Rhett and Jaime, have you heard anything in Luke's performance that would affect or maybe gives insight into a character or storyline that you might continue later? I guess what I'm asking is, has the audio performance maybe opened up new doors for the story to you that you wouldn't have thought of on your own?
Rhett, you want to take it?
Sure, I'll start taking it, and then you've listened to more so far, so then
you'll crash in like a bull in a china shop and take it over.
So I mean, I know for us, like, we don't want to change the story because of it, but I think it's helped us hear characters who maybe wouldn't have had as big of a role going forward that just sound incredible or really badass, and kind of we realize need a little bit more of a role in the story. So I think it informs us there. The interesting thing that we've gone through is we didn't get to hear any of the recording at all before all three books were written, because we set it up
before they were all performed.
You guys wrote them and I performed them, and then you heard them all.
Yeah, so that's how we set it up. Like, we didn't hear book one first and react to that or anything. So it's great Luke caught on to the arc of some of the characters, but we kind of didn't get to hear that stuff. So we had to talk with him and figure out if he picked up on that. Because obviously to explain any more would get into spoilers, but like he said with Whitney, he goes through a ton of stuff, and by the end of book 3, he's a very, very changed person. So those are the kind of things we wanted to make sure were picked up on in the audio, because we didn't get to hear it, and are picked up. So I think going forward into the next sort of half of the series, because we have sort of a 6-book plan right now, there's definitely some characters that'll be informed by the performance for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely. I've listened to both. I wouldn't say twice, but like I've listened to them all the way through, and then like portions over and over again, just to hear Luke lull me to sleep at night. And
yeah,
there's definitely some things that for me, first of all, like there was a character that Rhett and I won't tell you who, because I just don't want to do any of that spoiler stuff, but like Rhett and I talked about potentially killing. And after experiencing his Luke's performance of it, now we should start by saying this: our audio is like banging right now. Like Buried Goddess Saga is doing so well in audio that we would be idiots to not cater to the audio market. Of course, sure, we're selling ebooks, but like in the end, the majority of our readers or whatever are actually listeners. So
that's just the way the market's going now, though. It's taking a bigger and bigger piece of the pie.
And I'm happy that I actually told Rhett the other night, like, I can't even express the amount of joy I have knowing that right now a series that I co-wrote is doing well in audio, because I'm obsessed with audio.
Somebody's listening to it right now as we talk about it.
I know it, man.
If we didn't sell one ebook, he wouldn't even care.
Oh, I wouldn't. Not even a little bit. But with that said, like, we were going to kill off a character, and after listening through, I'm like, there's just no way we could kill this guy. There's no reason to kill this guy. Let's kill someone else instead. So we did. We killed somebody else instead. It was like blood requires blood, and like somebody had to die. Then the other side of the spectrum, Luke, you did Casimir, who you pronounce it Kashmir, which is fine.
Which is probably the proper
like,
proper way, just not in our minds.
I think it's a Kashmir, right?
Kashmir. And so I even called Rhett. I'm like, so Luke says Kazimir. So from now on, we say Kazimir because like
it's canon. It's canon. That's awesome.
Yeah. And so for Kazimir, you actually, Luke, did an amazing job picking up what we were putting down. Like we described how Kazimir looked, talked, acted. But in our minds, although we described it one way, we didn't see him that way.
Everyone talks like me in my mind because I read out loud to myself.
so Kazimir to me, like if I were to describe him, he was the dude from Witcher. Are you guys familiar with Witcher? That long white haired dude, skinny dude, whatever. But the way that you performed him was actually the way that we described. He talked kind of this like guttural whatever. Right. And I went, oh, crap, you did a much better job actually knowing what our characters sound like than we were, writing it.
Well, what's interesting is because I think you hit on a point with audio that is you're writing it and then someone else is reading it and interpreting it and they get, but you can't, that's really interesting you say that because they actually get what you're writing sometimes more than you do because you can't see the forest for the trees because you're writing 400 pages, you know what I mean? So like it's sometimes you're so much into it. It's interesting. That's a cool point.
Yeah, no,
I went back and I listened to how we described it and I went, oh crap, you did it perfectly. It just wasn't what I was hearing in my head.
No, and I think that probably brought more physicality to the guy because we both like literally in our heads, like we were picturing Geralt from The Witcher, but he's kind of a little bit more vicious than that.
Well, and there's also the transition that happens from writing to audio in that. So to bring the menace into it, there's a little bit of that in the voice with that may have to leap a little bit. It may not translate. Witcher's voice, how you think, may not translate to an audiobook as well. Does that make sense? Right. It may look cool with an image of Witcher and hearing the voice, but when that's all you hear is just the voice, it may not come across. It might come across different than you think.
No, and I totally agree because in those games, at least from what I've played of them, he's usually pretty collected. A little bit more relaxed, and the character we wrote at that time period was vicious.
And that was the thing I got from him was that at any moment he could slit your throat. So that was the thing of what I want to translate in that tension of like he's there, but at any moment he could snap.
It was right, exactly right, perfect.
That's fun.
Luke, you have done some series of books and kind of probably most famously Iron Druid, as Jamie and I were talking about earlier because we're just fantasy fanboys. But as a long-running series like that unfolds, do you and the author have a certain communication back and forth? Does the author, decide to bury things in there just to make you say things? And then do you do things to see if they'll influence the the future books?
Well, when you're talking about a book over, 9 years, there's a lot of time to fuck with each other. So yeah,
right.
I definitely think that it goes both ways. So for instance, long-running series like Richard Fox with the Ember War and all his spread out universe. He's a Facebook friend, so literally I'll be recording and I'll shoot him a message that says, WTF, who is Johansson? Have we had this person? And he'll write back, yeah, third book, such and such. And then I'll pull up the third book and then I'll go into the recording from 2 years ago and I'll listen and go, okay. Or he'll write back, no, new character, named it after a friend. And I'll go, okay. So there's those kind of people that I can have on speed dial, basically, which is so nice. Or Kevin is super generous and like giving me lots of time to help me go through it because his stuff is so dense with history and real stuff, and made up stuff. So making sure we have it all straight for the listeners, he's like dedicated, but beyond anybody other than Rhett and Jamie. So no, but and then he's made real sweet, he says things like Kevin says that he purposely picks the most difficult sounding words for me. I think it's kind of one, he does it in this cute, like, we're friends, but then it's also like, I really want to like make you work for this.
So you get names with all consonants.
Right. He did make that. And one of them, he had a Polish town, and he said it could have been any town in Poland, but I wanted the hardest. So he actually asked his Polish friends, what is the most difficult town name to pronounce? And they gave it to him. And I'm like, challenge accepted. Let's do this. But it backfired. I always tell him it backfires on him, because then I just say to him, can you get your friend to pronounce it for me? And then he records it and gives it to me. I'm like, well, there you go. So he's super, he's not going to cut my knees out under me. He's going to just mess with me a little. And then, I've had a couple authors put a name in. I remember one, I think it was Marcus Saki in his Brilliance trilogy. And there was a character in the second or third book after the first one had been released and did real well. And his name was Luke. And I was like, I really like this Luke character. He's really cool. And he's like, oh yeah, I totally named him for you. And I was like, what? Like, you didn't like tell me? Like, you didn't just be like, hey, by the way, like, I thought that was really cool. Or like, sometimes in thank yous.
Play this one straight. It's you.
Yeah, right. If I'd known that, I would have done a better job. No, no. So yeah, there becomes that. They're our greatest ally and asset as a narrator. Because it's their words, it's their world. So I'm all about the collaboration, because I sit in a small booth by myself. So anybody that can help me is welcome. I'm like asking the mailman, like, do you think this alien should sound like this, or should it be like kind of more? And the mailman's like, look, I just do this. Like, I've got 3 other jobs. I don't care.
Here's your package,
please.
buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as a writer, you get deep into projects sometimes, and it feels like you go days on end without any other human contact, hunched over a keyboard, living inside your mind. Sometimes I answered the phone the other day at like 1:00 in the afternoon, and I had not spoken to another human yet that day, and my voice didn't work yet, and stuff. I'm like, hello, and they're like, what's wrong with you? But as a narrator who you're in the booth and you're talking all day, yes, to yourself, but you're going through that. When you come out of the booth, are you like, I don't want to talk to anybody. Just, give me a little bit. What is that kind of decompression like, doing the kind of work that you do?
It does. I do. So when I did it, the first 5, 6, 7 years, 8 years, I was pushing. So it was definitely, I would come home and I couldn't talk. Like, I was working 5 days a week, recording, 8 hours a day, every week. Like, that's just a lot to sustain. And so, yeah, those days I was, I'd always make I had no desire to talk to anyone, read anything. But since I've kind of slowed down a little bit, and I've got the home studio that I work out of, and I can kind of pick projects and make my schedule a little better, I take enough breaks that it doesn't feel that way. So that's kind of something I've had to learn and work into my schedule, because otherwise I do go, it's just no life to live. Like, I can't survive that way. I did it for like 8 years, and it's great. And I'm glad I did, because it definitely got me where I'm at. But now I've got to like actually be a human being. And also the bucket runs dry. So if you're performing, it's just going to be stale and become masturbatory if you don't have any other outside existences that fulfill your, bring new experiences and inform your choices.
Do you ever get inspiration from random places or interactions with people, or from a movie or something, and have to run into the studio and like get it down just so you don't lose that idea?
I do sometimes pull up voice notes and do something on a voice note. So if I think of something in the car, I might try to record how I think of it so that, later I don't forget. But I pull from stuff I hear all the time. Yeah. Sometimes I'll even watch TV with my eyes closed. If I'm watching somebody and going, does their voice match up? What's weird about this voice? Like, sometimes you'll watch somebody, and you think like you can't quite put your finger on it, but there's something strange. If you close your eyes, sometimes you can kind of just home in on the voice a little bit. But yeah, voice notes are great for quick jotting it down when you can't get into the studio. I don't really run anywhere anymore. I pretty much avoid running at all costs. If I run, something's wrong. That's basically how I feel.
Right. If we see you running, we should just run with you and then figure it out later. Yeah. Right. Gotcha. We've mentioned a couple of times in this podcast that audio is really the new frontier that is showing all the expansion and just seems to be the hot place in publishing right now. Are there things that authors could be doing to make their story more palatable for audio?
Hold on, is there anything we could be doing, Luke? Specifically, we have 3 more books to write. What could we do better for you?
I think more money.
We don't pay you, so that's good.
Yeah, right. So there,
I'll
we should
make
have
a
a
call
luck, huh?
about that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Do you ever get a manuscript and go, oh wow, what have I gotten into?
Well, there's time. So I want to be politic, but that's tough. We don't do politics. I have passed on projects. I have passed on projects where I'm like, no, it's not the right fit for me. But that's how I put it. Yeah. I'm sorry, this is not the right fit for me. I don't say, but in my mind I might. No, but I don't know. That I've been really, really fortunate that most of the stuff I get is stuff that I like. So, and then I also challenge myself because there's stuff that I don't necessarily think I like, but then I'll try it and I'm like, oh, I can see why that's cool. Like, I did a business book, or I've done some, fiction stuff that I normally wouldn't be into, or any genre that I've never read or listened to. I'm curious to know what it's about. So I'll try it. I'll try anything once. Wink, wink.
That's what she said. I remember, Luke, I texted you early on. This might be. Oh, should I say this live? Hank, you cut it if Luke says don't put that on the air. I texted you early on, and I said, so Luke, you're from a family of actors, right? And you're like, yeah. I'm like, so none of them were singers, huh?
Nice.
So
nice.
That was after listening to
sing. I just have no rhythm. I would like to make a detailed note there that I actually have pretty good pitch, but I have zero rhythm. And I
agree with that.
Yeah, and I have no memory for lyrics. I'm one of those people that if I've heard a song a million times and it's my favorite song, I still don't know the lyrics to it.
That's fun. I made it a point that now I forgot about it completely. There was a song in book 1, and when I heard you sing it in book 1 in Web of Eyes, I went, oh crap, I forgot to put a song in the other books. So now 4, 5, and 6, just so you know, you're going to sing in all of them.
Oh, I'm planning on actually singing the entire book. I'm going to do chapter 1.
I think I put a note in a chapter in 4 already that says, Jimmy, insert song here. Because I don't write songs, but I know he does.
Nice. Well, but I did, just to get back, Hank, you asked a good question about what authors can do to I think that's actually a very good question, because you're right, there is a huge market share that's audio. But I don't, ultimately it's nothing really. I mean, it's still telling a good story, but I do think that watching and just kind of keeping an eye on the market would be helpful. Do you know what I mean? Like, what are people listening to? What are the popular things? What books seem to have really good reviews? You know what I mean? Like, I think it's just about becoming aware of that branch of their work, right? So it'd be the same as if becoming aware of how the publishing industry is changing and how it's just another facet of how they can get their story to the listeners. So it's kind of taking that into account, but also exploring it, listening to books. What do I like? What kind of things, I don't know. And if it doesn't work for you, then just say, fuck it and do what you do.
No, I think that's a great point. I think mostly just take it seriously as a way to get your book out there. Like, that's how we treat it. It's not secondary. They're just both two, like, ebook, print, this. It's all just stuff to focus on their own.
It's just another avenue of getting your story to somebody.
Yeah, and I think for some people it's like just secondary thing they do after the book's already out, but. Or they also think that it's taken care of, because a lot of times your audio rights are sold to a publisher, or you produce it however, and then it just goes out. But I think a lot of people like you, this is a good point of like following up, and so kind of trying to
help the train along too, just like you would when your book drops and you've got like a release date and you want to do those things. You're doing the same thing with the audio now too. So it's a little extra work, but carrying that over into your promotional plan is really helpful in capitalizing on that avenue.
Yeah, for sure. And we're very hands-on, even though we work with Audible Studios on just making
right,
sure
not
things
just
are
leaving
going
it up to somebody else. Right.
Yeah, because
right.
not, sometimes they're working on 1,000 different books.
We're right.
On one. So.
And audiences love the personal touch. They like to hear from the authors. So that always is a bonus. And with today's social media as it is, they have direct links to all of us, fortunately. So you can.
For all the times that's good.
Well, Rhett, like you talked about earlier, reading your manuscript out loud as you write. I think Nick Cole on like episode 4 of this podcast, we're on episode 530 something. Now he talked about in his writing process, acting out all of the different characters and making sure that the voices sound true. And I would think that especially if you're focusing on audio, that you should do that. You should make sure that your dialogue doesn't sound stupid, or make sure there's a good cadence or rhythm to it, so that, because when it is immortalized in audio and it's out there forever, it would be good to kind of vet that first and make sure you're giving your narrator the best thing that they can work with.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I usually do it when I'm sort of editing through after I write the first draft, mostly just for dialogue to make sure it's at least sounds somewhat conversational. And I know that's a huge part of this Buried Goddess series, is just we tend to pair really different people together and have them sort of bitch at each other the whole time while they're helping each other, sort of have light conversation, even if terrible things are going on around them.
Well, Hank,
I think that's
a
good point.
Oh, sorry.
Too, just to capitalize on that, what you asked of the things that they can do. Audio is great with dialogue. So I think if you're thinking about how can I enhance for audio, throw dialogue in. Nothing, in my opinion, at least, not because you're just doing it for willy nilly, but it's an audio form. The dialogue, we enjoy hearing the switching back and forth, that kind of stuff. So it really helps enhance it. And so it's not just straight narrative so much.
Well, Richard Fox posted the other day, he said he was watching James Patterson's masterclass or somebody's masterclass. And he said, and just so you know, there was no section on prose. And
that's funny.
And the truth is, like, dialogue is the key to any good book. I mean, nobody wants to read dense paragraphs over and over and over and over again. But for audio, it's even taken it to that extreme. Like, how do I really pull out the emotion? Well, the emotion is going to come out of your characters.
And you can also play with the medium. So if you're thinking, okay, this is audio, you can do a lot of stuff with thought processes. So if you're not having dialogue, if your character is alone, they can think, like I see you guys do that, when you inject the character's actual thoughts, so you can get the character voice in breaking up some of the narrative as well. So that's always a nice way to kind of keep that rhythm going, so it doesn't become chock-a-block, just talk.
Yeah.
But you can have some variation of thought processes.
Well, speaking of that, does first or third person narrative, does it make a difference to you as a narrator?
I love first person. Yeah, I love it. I always feel much more natural because I'm playing a character. Whenever I play a character, I feel more natural. When I'm just narrating straight third person, it's really hard to keep it sound. For me, it takes a lot more work to keep it sounding fresh because it has less of a character point of view as more of an omniscient teller.
If someone is dead set on third person, would it benefit them to try to envision that narrator as a character? That maybe the character's never revealed to us, the reader.
I think anybody wants to put personality into their telling. That character should be them, should be the author or whoever the story is coming from. So it should have character, yeah, but it doesn't have to be like a full-on character from the story. But I don't know. That's a tough one because you really need that omniscient storyteller. You can't give it always a point of view. So that's a tough one, but I think you can solve it by adding in the personal thoughts of the characters so you have both.
Yeah, I have a question that might it's a statement question, and maybe Luke, you could answer. I think something that Rhett and I really tried to do with Buried Goddess is each point of view, although it's told from a third person perspective, it reads, in my mind at least, it reads as a first person narrative in a third person telling. So like Whitney, every time Whitney's point of view comes up, like all the narrative sounds like Whitney.
Right.
And then in Torsten, all the narrative sounds like Torsten. It's almost like first person, but we're saying he and she instead of I.
Yeah, no, I definitely pick up on that.
Yeah.
I definitely pick up on that. You know, a narrator that does that really well is MacLeod Andrews. I've heard him. I directed him in a book, Robert Crace novel that we both share narrated, and then we split the directing. And he was one of the ones that I was like, oh, he pulled it off so well, because when they would go into the chapters that were about the killer, it was in third person, but he changed his whole tone and matched the tone of it so that it felt like it. So it was almost like a different narrator was doing those sections. And I really liked that, but I was like, ooh, that's risky. You can't pull that off unless you're really good. That's tough. Otherwise, you just sound like you're trying to, you know what I mean? It doesn't always work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's played into at least this series being so popular on audio more than anything else, is we, from the start, have tried, and I mean, I know I tried to do it in all my books, but we have really strong point of views for the chapters, like, and they never really break. And at quick reading, it may seem the world is shallow, but it's because we don't really tell anything outside of what our characters are experiencing. So I think that definitely helps from the narrative sense. As a story or a chapter by Whitney, even his inner thoughts are going to be real sarcastic, different than Sora, who's sort of in the beginning more hesitant and timid. Her chapters are written that way as well. So I definitely think that is something that helps you. I would hope it does.
Mm-hmm. It does.
Well, guys, we are bumping up on an hour here. The Buried Goddess Saga books 1 and 2 are out now. 2 just released about a week ago, I think. When will book 3 be out?
January.
Yep,
Yeah,
January 9th. January 8th.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Wednesday was weird.
Yep.
Yeah, it is. It's Tuesday, January 8th.
Nice. All right, we're gonna link it up in the show notes. Jaime and Rhett, I'll plug your websites and social media in the show notes. Luke, if folks want to know more about you and kind of dig into your back catalog and see all of that stuff, where can they connect with you?
Your local police blotter usually has a book or two. But if they can't find it there, they can go to luke-daniels.com.
Excellent. And you can also drop by Audible, and they have a fantastic page for you there. And
there's also one on ACX that's a pretty good one that gives a list, and there's an interview and stuff. ACX is independent publishing. We do a lot of stuff through them.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I mean, for authors, even us, but like, so do you do ACX?
Oh, yeah. I actually did this whole month is all ACX. So, yeah, that's a great one for people trying to get their stuff out there. And you can reach me on there, but you can go on and there's some really good tutorials on how to get your work out there.
And I'm going to plug you one more time. Do you prefer, because I know a lot of authors that listen to this, do you prefer to do royalty split or do you prefer to be paid up front?
You put me on the spot there. I don't know.
No, hey.
We'll have
depends on if that book's going to be a hit. Come on.
Well, I guess it depends.
Guys
ask me that all the time. Okay.
Yeah, it really depends on the project, the legs that it potentially has. Generally, if it's a first-time deal, I'm going to want to get paid. If it's something like Kevin Hearn, then I'm going to be definitely doing, if he wants to do a royalty share, I'll do a royalty share. So it just depends on the market reach.
Well, I just knew that there was going to be a bunch of people.
Or if I read something and it's so good and I love it and the person's amazing, then I would totally try to fit it in. In fact, I did my brother's book for free, but that was my brother's, so don't try to do that.
Was that the one you did the trailer for?
Yeah, he did a great romance, Kilt Lifter.
Exactly.
Actually, it was a total kilt lifter called The Viking's Bride. You can check it out on Audible. It's really good. It's actually really funny. It's actually, I use Owen. He's a major character. So if you like Owen from the Iron Druids, he's got a great part in that one.
if we come to you with a printout from Ancestry.com and can link something up,
Yeah, we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
For you, Frank, and
Yeah, all right.
Hank, whatever.
Whatever. Thanks, Rhett, Jaime, Luke. Thank you guys so much for coming on the show. We're going to link everything up in the show notes. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you having me.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. You can find archives of all of the shows at hankgarner.com, and when you're there, please subscribe. Up next is an audiobook clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
The ancient building wore the severe cassock colors of a Puritan minister, a uniform monochrome of slate-gray shingles and soot-gray clapboards, its shadowed upper windows cross-hatched like the facets of a spider's eye. The second story protruded beyond the first and bore the house's only ornament, 2 gray teardrops of wood, weeping from each corner of the building's stiff upper lip. The place would have looked sinister and foreboding in its shadowed alley if not for the die-cut silhouette of a dancing sheep, jaunty above the door, and the 2 front bay windows that blazed with colorful, welcoming light. The windows were hung with orbs of colored glass on staggered lengths of ribbon. Each orb glowed with autumnal reds and delicate greens, burgundy tints and pumpkin hues, dappled raspberry and clover lime, streaked with light and weightless as bubbles over a cauldron. The shelves below offered crystal skulls and silver daggers and horny devils, Celtic chalices and woven dream catchers in dreamcoat hues. A primitive broom leaned in a corner, ready for flight, and a rhapsodic nude in bronze clutched her goat-legged lover beneath a jackal bust of Anubis. The interior of the shop was even witchier. Above a crude and sooty fireplace, a stack of brick barely holding the shape of a chimney pushed through the barn-high roof, threading ancient beams that crisscrossed overhead. Brooms and kettles and Christmas lights dangled from these, alongside Halloween costumes and Chinese umbrellas, pointy hats and bundles of herbs. Jason wandered deeper into the shop. His fingers trailed across strange bronze statuary and Aztec masks of turquoise and lapis lazuli. He rolled his eyes at the luck candles and money charms, but goggled indecently at a nude and anatomically correct silver nymph with long golden hair that reminded him of Kate. "See anything you like?" Jason jumped, turned, and jumped again. The woman standing before him was the living embodiment of every hippy-dippy counterculture type he'd ever seen. Her hair was green, her face pale and round, her doughy body wrapped in some elaborately woven ethnic garb. Her eyebrows were black and pierced in little rows, and her eyes were heavily circled with midnight blue, as if she'd been sucker-punched by an oil slick. She tapped the glass over the nymph. "Admiring the goddess, I see." She'd practically caught him with porn. "You want to hold her? She won't break. Here." The woman flipped open a glass door and handed Jason the naked figure. "See how heavy she is? You could bang her against the wall all day and barely make a dent." She waggled her eyebrows, obviously enjoying his discomfort. He checked the price tag. $700? The goddess is a symbol of love and fertility. Don't be ashamed of desiring her. The woman's long green fingernails plucked a long black cigarette from a long red case, and she lit it. "I sense," she blew smoke and studied its whorls, "dissatisfaction in love? Yes? I have just the thing." She pulled Jason into a side room where the smell of her clove smoke gave way to the skunky aromas of potpourri sachets, tea leaves, and hanging clutches of twiggy flowers. She searched, found a little bundle, and pressed it into his hand. "This will make you irresistible. Rub it on your nethers twice a day, and love shall surely find you." Jason made a face. The bundle smelled like cow manure. He didn't even want that on his hands.